Coming up today, Korea's ruling party unilaterally passes scores of bills and legal revisions designed to revitalize the sagging economy and improve the livelihood of the people. Second quarter earnings for Korean tech giant Samsung Electronics will likely miss expectations due to slow smartphone sales amid ongoing supply issues. Plus, Germany and France are pressing Greece to make realistic proposals on a possible bailout deal after Greeks rejected austerity. An emergency eurozone summit on the matter is scheduled for later today. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Tuesday, the 7th of July. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. And we start at the National Assembly. The two countries' two main rival parties are at odds again after the ruling Saenuri party unilaterally passed dozens of bills at a session on Monday night. The main opposition, New Politics Alliance for Democracy, had boycotted the session after the ruling party refused to participate in a revote on a vetoed parliamentary law earlier in the day. The ruling party said its move to pass the economy-related bills was to stimulate the economy, while the main opposition party criticised the action. Meanwhile, the fate of the ruling party's embattled floor leader, Yoo Seung-min, will be decided at a general meeting of party lawmakers on Wednesday morning. Now, Yoo has been under intense pressure to resign from the presidential office and within his own party because of his involvement in the initial passage of the now vetoed and scrapped bill. He says he will go along with the will of his fellow lawmakers. And finally, the Assembly's Judiciary Committee is currently holding a one-day confirmation hearing for Justice Minister nominee Kim Hyung-eung, the head currently of the Seoul High Prosecutor's Office. Now, at Tuesday's cabinet meeting, President Park Geun-hye made no specific reference to the scrapping of the National Assembly law revision from the day before or the fate of the embattled ruling party floor leader. She stressed, however, that officials should not do anything for their own personal benefit. Rather, they should do their best to enhance the people's livelihoods and the domestic economy. At the previous meeting, the president had heavily criticised ruling party floor leader Yoo Seung-min for engaging in politics for his own personal philosophy and logic. Now, President Park focused most of her attention today on the local economy, which has been severely impacted by a severe drought and the MERS outbreak. She also urged officials to ensure a bill for a $10 billion supplementary budget passes the parliament this month, so that the additional funds included in a $20 billion government stimulus package can be swiftly implemented. Samsung Electronics is still struggling to regain the spark that drove it to the top of the tech world. The company's guidance figures for the second quarter show that while Samsung's profits picked up sharply on quarter, they were still down from the same period last year. Analysts say disappointing smartphone sales most likely ate into profits made by its memory chip division. Kim Min-ji reports.
Second quarter figures from Samsung Electronics show the Korean tech giant is slowly recovering, but it's still underperforming compared to a year ago. In its preliminary earnings forecast, Samsung recorded an operating profit of $6.1 billion, up more than 15% from the previous quarter. Compared to last year, it's down 4%. Sales also fell 8% on year to nearly $43 billion. After an earnings shock in the third quarter of last year, Samsung has rebounded and is on a mild recovery track. But second quarter earnings still fell slightly below analyst expectations of $6.3 billion. Analysts attribute this to tepid sales of Samsung's latest smartphones. After the release of its Galaxy S6 Edge smartphone in April, Samsung also failed to meet the unexpected demand for the industry's first smartphone with curved screens on both sides. On top of this, Apple has been eating into Samsung's share of the so-called phablet market with its bigger iPhones, while Chinese players have been gaining ground at the low end of the market. Analysts assume the majority of Samsung's profits to be generated by its memory chip division, as well as consumer electronics sector, especially due to better TV sales. The guidance figure does not break down the performance by sector, and the company's finalized earnings will be announced later this month. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
The Seoul Central District Court has dismissed all injunctions brought by the U.S. hedge fund Elliott Associates, which was seeking to block a proposed merger by Samsung C&T. The court said on Tuesday that the takeover offer by Cheil Industries, which is Samsung Group's de facto holding company, is a reasonable management decision. Now, Elliott, the third largest shareholder in Samsung's construction unit, Samsung C&T, had argued that the merger is unfair, saying Samsung C&T shareholders would be getting well under the market price for their shares. With the court's decision, Samsung C&T will go ahead with a scheduled shareholder vote on July 17th. Where it will most likely win approval for the merger with the other Samsung units. And now for another update on the outbreak of Middle East respiratory syndrome here in Korea. And according to the Health Ministry on Tuesday, no new cases have been reported for the past 2 days. And the death toll from the disease has remained unchanged for a week now at 33. The total number of people diagnosed with the MERS virus stands at 186. Of that number, 35 remain in hospital, while the number of fully recovered patients has risen to 118. Also, the number of people under quarantine has fallen to 674 from slightly over 900 the day before. And with concerns about the MERS outbreak receding, demand for domestic travel and travel-related products is picking up fast. Local online shopping mall G-Market says that, in particular, tickets for water parks and spa resorts jumped more than 450% within a week up to July 5th. This compared to the first week of June this year. Reservations for rented condos, known as pensions here in Korea, and campsites also spiked nearly 150%. Now, this is extremely welcome news for the local tourism sector, which has been rocked by the MERS outbreak. The Korea Culture and Tourism Institute says the business survey index of around 150 travel companies found that in the second quarter sentiment was even lower than the months following last year's deadly Sewol-ho ferry sinking. In international news now, and a day after Greeks overwhelmingly voted against the terms of their bailout programme, the leaders of Greece's major creditor nations, Germany and France, held a meeting to discuss what to do next. They say the doors for dialogue are open, but they have urged Athens to come up with serious proposals to move things forward. Handan has more.
The Greek debt crisis entered a new phase following Sunday's referendum. German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who had ruled out all talks until after the referendum, now says that Germany accepts the results of the vote and will work toward an appropriate solution.
We respect the decision of this referendum. It's the vote of a democratic and sovereign country, and now we have to live with this decision. The question is, what the attitude of the other 18 countries of the eurozone will be to this vote, and to know what solutions we will find.
The leader of Greece's biggest creditor nation also said the doors to talks are open, but urged Athens to work quickly to come up with constructive proposals.
Time is of the essence, and we insist that the Greek proposals must be on the table this week, so we can deal with the situation the way it is at the moment.
French President François Hollande, who previously deferred with Merkel on how to handle the Greek crisis, echoed Merkel's comments this time, saying that Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras needs to make serious, credible proposals so his desire to stay in the eurozone can be realized. The two leaders have called on eurozone ministers to hold an emergency meeting in Brussels on Tuesday. Experts say their opinions largely reflect the views of eurozone ministers as a whole. Meanwhile, Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras, who gained a major boost after Sunday's victory, has made it clear that he wants the proposed debt relief outlined in the IMF's latest report on Greece to be part of the agenda for future talks. The IMF has said that Greece's debts are unsustainable and should be restructured. All eyes are now on how many concessions Cyprus will make to save his country from imminent financial collapse. Handaeun, Arirang News.
And the results of the referendum in Greece are already having an impact on global stock markets and global oil prices. A growing number of analysts fear the situation could have serious effects on the already fragile global economy. Gonsua reports.
It came as no surprise that the results of Greece's referendum on Sunday dragged down global stock markets. European countries were affected the most. There was a moderate fall in the US and a plunge across much of Asia. Oil prices tumbled to their biggest one-day decline in 3 months on Monday, with US crude plummeting nearly 8%. The downward trend may have been expected, but still there were jitters around the world.
So we're seeing an increase in volatility. The VIX has spiked because of this, and we're going to see a global sell-off because there is so much uncertainty.
It's a catastrophic scenario for the markets. It could not be worse because in case of a new disagreement between the creditors and the Greek government, we are moving towards a Greek request to exit the eurozone.
And it's the prospect of a Grexit that's the real concern. Experts say Greece's default itself will have a minimal impact on world economies, as the country represents just 0.3% of the world's GDP. Private creditors had already pulled out their money out of the country years ago. But if Greece leaves the eurozone, the fear is that it could set off a rash of similar cases, for instance in Spain, that could destabilize the entire European community. And that could also impact the U.S. Fed's ability to raise interest rates later this year. The impact on the two major powers would naturally trickle down to Asia too, including Korea.
If the Greek crisis spreads to European countries and doubts about the eurozone's stability increase, it could continue to have a negative effect on the bourse for the long term.
The local stock market started Tuesday off on a positive note in anticipation that Athens would re-engage in negotiations with its creditors. The benchmark Kospi and tech-heavy Kosdaq began the day at 0.6% and 1.7% higher than the day before, but the figures soon started dropping again, prompting some to caution against downplaying the effects of the fallout from the crisis in Greece. Kwon-soa, Arirang News.
Now there's fresh controversy today after UNESCO's recent listing of Japanese wartime industrial facilities as World Heritage Sites. Hoping to pull the wool over people's eyes at home, the Japanese government is already trying to muddy the waters about the use of Korean slave laborers at the facilities. Tens of thousands of Koreans had to toil at least 7 of the sites during Japan's colonial rule of Korea. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
U.S. Congressman Mike Honda has taken aim at the Japanese government for failing to inform the public at home that Tokyo has acknowledged the use of forced labor at several of Japan's newly UNESCO-inscribed sites. Describing it as a typical tactic to mislead the Japanese people on history, Honda said Tokyo avoided using the expression forced labor, instead translating it into a much softer colloquial expression. The Japanese-American representative called on Japan to be honest about the facility's history and fully acknowledged that POWs from around the world suffered there. He also advised Japan to clearly apologize to victims still alive. This comes after Japanese media reported on Monday that Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida said Tokyo did not acknowledge that Koreans were forced to labor at several of the sites. Kishida said Japanese ambassador to UNESCO Kuni Sato's statement at the World Heritage Committee meeting, which said forced to work, did not signify that Japan admitted slave laborers were used there. Seoul's foreign minister reacted quickly to refute the minister's claims, saying the English version of the statement is the one officially adopted by UNESCO's World Heritage Committee. Therefore, it's the official text, and there's no room for misinterpretation. The ministry added that Japan must submit a progress report by the end of 2017, which will be reviewed by the committee the following year. If Japan's progress is deemed unsatisfactory, the sites could be removed from the UNESCO list. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Ginseng products will be overseen by the United Nations Food Standards Body as a food or food ingredient. The Codex Alimentarius Commission, which examines and adopts new food safety and quality standards, on Monday approved the decision to allow Korean ginseng products to rank within the international standards. Now, up until now, ginseng products were considered medicines in most countries, meaning they were subject to complex customs procedures and fewer customs-related benefits. Seoul's Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs said it expects the new standard to open up more export opportunities for ginseng products. Now, traditional Korean foods such as kimchi, the red pepper paste gochujang and the soybean paste doenjang are already registered under the Commission's international list of food-related standards and guidelines. And while we're on the topic of Korean food, bingsu is an extremely popular shaved ice flake dessert that's usually consumed during Korea's hot summer months. The combination of ice, milk, fruit and rice cake tastes delicious. But with most food that tastes good, it does pack a heavy calorific punch. According to local food industry sources, the amount of calories in one serving of bingsu sold at a popular bakery chain in Korea is equal to 4 bowls of white rice, coming in at a belt-busting 900 calories. It also contains 9 grams of saturated fat, well over half an adult's daily recommended amount. And with that, that's all we have for now. I'm Mark Broome. Have a wonderful day. Go easy on the bingsu. Thank you as always for watching, and we do hope to see you at the same time tomorrow. Until then, goodbye.